Hello again, everybody, and welcome into Gamecock Central Radio. Emerson Phillips with Chris Clark, and a big day for Gamecock football recruiting yesterday. Chris, the Gamecocks picked up their first 3 commitments for Will Muschamp and this new Gamecock staff. Tell us about these 3 and who else the Gamecocks are working on right now.
The way I classified it was a technical trifecta because C.J. Freeman had an announcement last night, but he never decommitted from South Carolina. He always remained committed. He didn't open things up, even though technically he sort of did open things up. He listened to Wisconsin. He listened to Louisville. He had Georgia Southern in there too, interestingly, probably because they carry the football a lot, and he's been there on a visit. But, he stayed committed technically, but still had a little ceremony last night around 7:30 or so just to finalize his decision, and ended up sticking with the Gamecocks, announcing that. So he was one. Then you had 4-star Brian Edwards, who was decommitted from South Carolina. He was a one-time verbal commitment. And then Siderius Utterson out of Tennessee, who's a guy that, is a defensive end, thought of as a defensive end, but is someone that USC has eyes on beefing up and making into an offensive tackle down the road. Really long and athletic kid, and the type of kid that you can really see projecting into an O-lineman. He's more of a down-the-road prospect. He's not a guy you should expect to come in and play early next season because he's got to learn the position and he's got to put on the weight. But down the road, he's one of those guys that you could see blossoming because of his measurables and because of his skills. Freeman and Edwards were a couple of Freeman, I think, a really solid pickup at running back. USC needs running back help, and I really think it'd be wise to take another one in this class. I think they'll look at taking another one in the class, too, to pair with Freeman. But just a solid back, not anything super flashy. It doesn't have elite measurables or elite speed, but a solid back who can get you some yardage and catch the ball out of the backfield. Edwards was a big get, a significant get, because Clemson's pushed hard lately. Actually had him on the board as a defensive back, but told him he could play either DB or receiver. Had some family connections to Clemson too, but South Carolina was able to get him on campus for an official visit this past weekend, and that really made the difference, showing him how he'd be used in the offense, the opportunity for early playing time, the fact that he knew that he could play receiver and play it very early at South Carolina. He's an early enrollee. Those things all played, I think, a significant role, and that was a big in-state get.
All right, Edwards was the first commitment of 3 yesterday for Will Muschamp and the Gamecock staff. And, Chris, how healthy is Brian Edwards? We know he was injured during his senior season. Just a few months ago, he was hurt playing for Conway High. How healthy is he, or isn't he, right now?
Well, I couldn't tell you in terms of his running around and what he could do, things like that. I did see him over the weekend. And he was walking around fine. He wasn't on crutches or limping or anything like that. So, it'll take him obviously a while to get back up to speed. And we'll just have to see where he's at with that once he enrolls. And obviously he'll have the opportunity to go through spring practice if everything's ready. But, he looked fine. And you see that with the knee injuries a lot. Guys can walk around and look, totally fine. But, not sure where he's at. He hasn't really had, game action. He missed the rest of his senior season, but he looked fine in terms of just walking around. Wasn't walking around on crutches. I didn't see any boot or anything like that.
Okay. Yeah, we haven't heard a lot about the injury to Brian Edwards. We know he was hurt late in his senior year, and he did miss the remainder of the season, as you mentioned, but there's not been a lot of information available about that to this point, but plenty of time for him to get right, and that certainly is good news for Gamecock football fans and good news for Brian Edwards. So just a couple of hours after Brian Edwards recommitted to South Carolina, it was Siderius Utterson out of Huntington, Tennessee, 3-star offensive line prospect, and he said that he had a good conversation with Coach Muschamp. Coach Muschamp said that he thought Siderius is a big athletic guy and he sees a lot of potential in him.
Yeah, definitely. And again, a lot of people look at offensive linemen and you want the guys who are already ready-made, like a Cam Robinson from Alabama. Heck, everybody wants that. And if you can get those guys, you should land them. But we've seen a lot of guys that can really grow into the position. If you're an offensive lineman, it's about having the tools, the measurables, the athleticism, and the smarts to be able to play that position. And I think, look, one guy that I love to go back to, and for anybody listening, go back and do this. A first-round pick of the Philadelphia Eagles not too long ago was Lane Johnson out of Oklahoma. Big old guy. This guy was, if you go back and look up his Rivals.com recruiting profile, he was a 202-pound quarterback, 202. He was a quarterback coming out of high school, and he ended up at Oklahoma. I think he played tight end, and I think he played defensive end too, and finally beefed up, moved to tackle, became an all-conference, I think all-American guy, and ended up being a first-round draft pick at offensive line. So these things can be tough to project. I mean, Lim Jean-Pierre is a guy who's still on an NFL roster and had a solid career at South Carolina, but he came to South Carolina as a 3-star defensive tackle, and I think he was about 250 pounds or so, somewhere around where Hutcherson is. So offensive line is really tough to project, and you need some ready-made guys and some guys that play early. I don't think Hutcherson is going to be an early play guy, but he's someone that could physically has the tools to develop into a guy down the road. So he's an intriguing prospect, I would say.
Okay. Yeah, I tell people all the time, Chris, that the recruiting ranking system is an inexact science. So you take the star ratings with a little bit of a grain of salt. I always think of Sidney Rice, the former great Gamecock wide receiver. He was a 3-star prospect coming out of Gaffney, and he ended up being all-pro in the National Football League. So the recruiting systems, the rankings are an inexact science, to say the least. So Edwards committed first, or recommitted first yesterday. Then it was Hutcherson, and then last night the 3-star running back out of Greensboro, C.J. Freeman, announced that he will play for South Carolina as well, pledged verbally to South Carolina. And I thought it was interesting. Freeman said that if you'd have asked him the same question 4 days ago, he probably would have said Wisconsin.
Yeah, I think that was very interesting. And look, it was a key weekend. And I remember Freeman told me that going into the official visit weekend, lasted, Friday through Sunday, is that it was a really, really big weekend. Wisconsin's head coach, Paul Chryst, went down and visited with him this past week. And I think that made an impression too. And Wisconsin, obviously, they have a strong tradition they've developed with running backs. And you go up there, you feel like you're going to get the ball a lot and be able to carry it and star in that offense. And I think that same day it was, South Carolina sent Muschamp and Bobby Bentley and Sean Elliott down to see him, and that made an impression. Freeman wanted to have a chance to sit down and meet with the new coaches. And so he had that opportunity in his home, and then right on the heels of that, he had the official visit. Anytime there's a coaching changeover and you're a guy who's going to be getting the football really at any position, you just want to see, okay, what are these coaches like? What's the style of play? How am I going to be utilized? How are they going to maximize my potential and my talent? And so for Freeman, he wanted to see, what Bobby Bentley was like. He wanted to see what Kurt Roper's offense was like. And he liked what he saw. And there were a lot of reasons why he liked South Carolina to start with. There was a reason that he was committed already to South Carolina. But he just wanted to become comfortable with those things. And I think he had a pretty strong bond with Brandon McElwain, the Gamecocks quarterback commitment over the weekend, and talked to some other guys as well. So exiting that official visit weekend on Sunday, things looked pretty good for South Carolina, but he still needed to go home and think it over.
Yeah, and Freeman mentioned that having a previous relationship with Bobby Bentley was a major consideration for him as well. So all things looking good for the Gamecocks with 3 commitments yesterday. Gamecock Central Radio here with Emerson Phillips and Chris Clark. We invite you to download the free phone apps that allow you to listen to Gamecock Central Radio on your phone. The iPhone app is out. We've had the Android app out for some time now, and we're also on iTunes. Simply search Gamecock Central Radio for all 3. Chris, Hutcherson mentioned that he plans to take an official visit to Memphis coming up in January. So even though he's given his verbal pledge to South Carolina, his recruitment is still open to some degree, and nothing becomes official until signing day in February.
I don't even know if Hutcherson will end up taking that visit. If he does, it's possible. The other 2 will not. Freeman and Edwards are both early enrollees, and so South Carolina's early enrollment date in terms of when classes start, I believe, is January 11th. The dead period ends after that, so they're landlocked. They can't even go anywhere right now legally. They can't be visited by any coaches. They can't go on any unofficial or official visits. So unless there's some huge reversal where those guys do not end up enrolling early, then they're locked in, and they're going to be enrolling early at South Carolina, and of course that'll give them the capability to go through spring practice.
You can get breaking Gamecock news alerts delivered to your email inbox. Just text USC to 42828. Text USC to 42828. Emerson Phillips here with Chris Clark. Chris, what about Sam Denmark and from Hanahan, some of these other kids that we've heard about in-state recently that the Gamecocks have shown interest in? When can we expect to hear something from Sam Denmark, and talk about some of the other recruits that the Gamecock staff is working on, even though we're in the dead period here?
Yeah, there's a lot of guys that you're going to see a flurry of activity on the road once dead period ends in mid-January, but still a lot of work going on behind the scenes. A lot of guys being contacted, phone contact, social media. We dropped several new names to watch on Gamecock Central and the Insider Report this morning. If fans that are subscribers want to check that out, there's a lot of new names to watch. But there's still some substantial in-state targets that they're going to try to get official visits from. And, you mentioned Denmark. He was one of the 6 guys on campus for an official visit. A Virginia Tech battle with South Carolina. He's committed to the Hokies, has been for a while. I'd still classify it as an uphill battle. It's just a situation where even though Denmark's an in-state kid and sort of had eyes on playing for the Gamecocks, behind the 8 ball. I mean, he's been on campus a couple times with the previous staff, but the interest there was lighter. There wasn't an offer on the table. Now there is, and so that changes things, but there's a lot of reasons he still likes Virginia Tech as well. So I'd still say South Carolina's behind Virginia Tech there. Whether or not they can make up any ground, we'll see. In the last several weeks before signing day, they're continuing to work them. Casey Crosby hosted them over the weekend, and those guys, from what I understand, had a pretty good bond as well. Troy Pride is a guy from the upstate who's got several offers and really had a strong senior season. Gamecocks need a lot of defensive backs. You'll probably see them take several in this class, and Pride is someone that Muschamp visited with, talked with, and he's looking at making an official visit in January too. There's a guy signing today actually, in Jamarcus King, the number 1 junior college prospect in the country. He's going to be signing with the Gamecocks or Auburn or Arkansas. And coming out of the official visit this weekend, it looked like South Carolina had the best shot with him. It'd be a substantial pickup. Another mid-year enrollee, a junior college guy with experience who's got very, very good cover skills and length. He's 6'2" corner, and someone that Muschamp and Travaris Robinson were familiar with from their time at Auburn. But even though it's a dead period and there's no visits right now, still a lot of activity going on, and it'll pick up even more once the dead period ends next month.
All right, Chris, final thought here. Thoughts on the coaching staff. 5 positions have been filled. Looks like there will be 4 more to be filled coming up in the next couple of weeks. Talk about the 5 assistants that are on staff. Obviously, Sean Elliott was retained, and we've talked about Travaris Robinson, who will handle the defense for Will Muschamp. But special teams coach and strength and conditioning coordinator named this week. Tell us about them.
Yeah, Coleman Hutzler's the special teams coach, and he's a guy that came from Boston College, and he was with Will Muschamp for a year at Florida, too. He's a younger coach. He's been at New Mexico. He's been at Florida. He's been at Boston College. Very good guy from what I've been told. It's hard to sort of assess the recruiting ability because, the biggest school he's been at is Florida, and he was only there for a year. And so it's sort of tough to assess that. But he's a younger, pretty energetic guy, and someone that, a lot of people thought he may go to Maryland with DJ Durkin. He's got a good relationship with Durkin from the time at Florida as well. But he's a guy that Muschamp wanted and was actually in town yesterday. Dillman was Muschamp's strength and conditioning coach at Florida, and then once Muschamp left Florida and went to Auburn, Dillman was at Alabama. And so Alabama, of course, has a very good program there under Scott Cochran, and Dillman worked with him, and so he's been at Appalachian State as well in his career and at IMG. Those guys are in place and ready to go.
All right, Gamecock Nation breathing a little bit easier today after Will Muschamp and this new Gamecock staff picked up 3 football commitments yesterday, and we're going to have plenty more news and information on recruiting in the days and weeks to come. Chris, we appreciate your hard work, and we thank you for the update today.
Thank you for having me. Appreciate it.
All right, that's Chris Clark, and I'm Emerson Phillips, and we'll have plenty more Gamecock football here on Gamecock Central Radio. Thanks for joining us.